If I was going to continue on the path of the Dark Brotherhood, I had to fulfill the rest of the contracts. After speaking with Nazir, he gave me 3 people to take down. I did a little bit of training before I set out. I wanted to make sure my skills were sharp. I took the time to sharpen my blade and ready my gear. I left the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary and set out on the next contract. I had to travel across the lands to a town called Dawstar. That's where the first bounty waited for me to collect. This first journey was about to be a 2-day hike. After walking through the night, I made my way to Loria's farms. I found a farmer and his wife tending to the homestead. I knew at this point I couldn't let them see me, so I decided to take mercy and just leave. It was slightly annoying having to go around rather than through, but I knew my cause was just. There had to be a reason why I was accepting all these contracts. These people didn't deserve life. Just then, I ran into a couple of bandits. I drew an arrow to let them know to back off and I meant business. We made eyes at each other as I slowly made my way around them. At this point, I didn't want any trouble. I just wanted to get to where I was going. Tension seemed to ease as I slowly backed away. They sheathed their weapons, and so did I. I carried onward. I was about halfway to my destination. The next day, I walked down the cobblestone road. There was a bitter chill in the air. I knew I was in Dawstar. I made it to the front of the town and ran into a couple of merchants. I spoke to one of them if they knew anyone named Beatild in town. They let me know that he is the mine boss. I checked the bounty note to make sure I had the right person. I looked through the town, but I didn't see any signs of a mine shaft. I went up towards the mountains, and that's where I saw it. The entrance to the mines. I knew this could be dangerous. I decided to look around before I went in, and luckily enough, that's where I spotted her. She was working right next to the smelter. It seemed too easy. However, there was also a witness next to her. I decided the best thing to do right now was to use the power of my ring. It glowed and cast a spell, freezing time around me. I drew my bow and fired a couple of arrows at them. The arrows hit their target, killing both of them with ease. I grabbed the bounty and brought her to a safe spot. I drew my blade and collected proof of the bounty. The first one was done. Only 2 more left. The next target was about half a day's walk away, at the mill. It was a long, cold, and difficult journey to get to this damn mill, but I wanted to prove my worth. I found a small camp overlooking the mill. I had a feeling they might be inside this tent. I drew my blade, crept quietly towards the tent. There he laid, completely asleep and unaware of the impending doom. I did what I had to do, and I plunged the sword into the back of their throat. I resheathed my blade. I moved around and searched the body to make sure I got the contract right. I looked at the contract and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt I had fulfilled it. I left the paperwork right next to his corpse. My final contract was about half a day's hike up the mountain to a town called Avarstead. It was the mid-afternoon, and I was almost there. I walked up to the signpost and knew I was in Avarstead. The contract said that they were a beggar. I wondered what crime could a beggar have done. It wasn't really my place to ask questions though. I just came into the town with the sword drawn. It seemed to be a small fishing village. Everything seemed intimate. I knew what I had to do. I had to muster up the courage and just slaughter the town. I crossed through the water, trying to find another living being. I moved on to a dilapidated house and I could hear something in the distance. And that's when I saw a pathetic-looking raggedy beggar. Did he know that his life was about to end? I decided to confront him. I had to know what crime he committed. I told him that his life was about to be over. He put his head down in shame. What he admitted to was one of the worst things I've ever heard. I drew my blade and cut his throat. I didn't know if it was out of anger or disgust, but I severed his head from his neck. I then took the body and cast it into the river to go down the stream. This man was vile. I had completed all 3 contracts. The only thing left to do was return to Nazir. After a 2-day hike, I made it back to the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary. I approached the door and let him know that I had returned. There seemed to be a meeting going on. They were talking about the Night Mother. Astrid looked at me and gave me another contract to fulfill, but I first wanted to see Nazir. I let him know my exploits and my victories.
There will be plenty more, I promise you.
I let her know that I had it handled, so I approached the Dark Brotherhood door and went back outside. It seemed I had to return back to the city of Markoth. I knew I wasn't welcome there. It was mid-afternoon when I crossed that bridge. I looked at the way sign and I knew I was in Markov. But of course there was a guard right in front of me. I kept my head down and walked past the guard. They didn't seem to notice. I approached the city and walked up the stairs. I didn't remember this town looking this fancy. The city streets was busy with stone and citizens all outside. I knew this contract was going to be difficult. I continued to walk through the streets. To be careful to keep my face away from the guards, I asked some of the townspeople if they knew who I was talking about. They gave me no information. I knew if I got a bird's eye view, it would be a little bit easier to find who I was looking for. And with a stroke of luck, I found my target right in front of me.
Why are you looking at me like that?
She didn't know what I was going to do, but there was a witness. I used the power of my ring again to freeze time around me. I drew an arrow and fired it towards his skull.
Help me!
Just then I noticed I had lost the target. Where could she have gone? I looked down and noticed that she was making her way down into the heart of the city. I decided rather than act rashly, I kept my cool and walked down the stairs. I didn't know what to do. She seemed to just be aimlessly wandering. Did I really want to have to fight and kill an entire city just for one contract? I decided to wait up against the wall. She was going to make a mistake at some point. I just had to be ready for it. She started to walk back up the stairs. I knew this could be my opportunity. I followed her up those stairs. She was alone now. Once she reached the top, I knew what I had to do. Make it look like an accident.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Before I pushed her, I realized that she was giving the contracts away. I had felt embarrassed. I was still relatively new to contract killing, but this next hike was about 2 days away. It was morning. I was almost there, but that's when something strange ran directly at me. A bounty hunter seemed to come right for me. I wasn't going to pay him any gold, and I sure as hell wasn't going to die to him. I drew my blade, knowing that I was in for a battle. I used the power of my ring to slow time around me, blocking his blows and striking him with ease. The bounty hunter fell down. I wasted no time with mercy. I struck him to the floor. I found this to be odd, so I searched his body and found the contract. Someone had put a hit out on me. This was strange. At this point, I am the Dark Brotherhood. Would they really put a hit out on me? I continued to make my way up the mountainside, thinking that bounty hunter must have just been a test. But why test me if I'm already fulfilling the objectives? Something didn't feel right. I felt like I was walking into a trap. I drew my blade and found bandits. I wasted no time. I had to make quick work of them. Another silver hand fired a bow. I blocked it and slaughtered her. There was one left. An honorable sword duel was approached. She miscalculated, so I swung at her guts. She laid there in a pool of her own blood. The valley was deep, the mountain tall, and the air frigid. I looked up and saw what seemed to be a demon. I drew my blade as it ran directly at me. I knew I was in for a fight. I swung my blade, trying to block multiple blows. Eventually, I fired magic. It was no match. Why would there be Daedra here? This contract was getting stranger and stranger. I knew someone wanted me dead, but I was almost to the top. I walked up those cold stone stairs, revealing what seemed to be ruins. I ran into more bandits. At this point, I was a savage, firing beams, turning people into dust. Their arrows were no match for me either. I ran in and closed the gap, blocking arrows, firing beams, and chopping them down to size. This person had guards. They knew I was coming. I ran inside and found a sleeping highwayman. I took no mercy and just fired beams of lightning at him, torturing his vessel. This bounty had gone to great lengths to keep themselves protected. I ran into more bandits. I had to make quick work of them. I approached what seemed to be ballistas, aiming down. I took a peek, and I couldn't believe it. The contract was just sitting there. I ran over to the ballistas and turned them on. It fired a shot, killing at least 2 of the guards. He drew a warhammer ready to fight me. I drew my blade as well. I blocked his blows and swung back at him. I could tell by his form he wasn't much of a warrior. Hence all the damn bodyguards. Once he missed, I did a powerful strike at his throat. sending his lifeless corpse to the ground. Another guard ran up. There was nothing she could do. I had already killed her boss, but she continued to battle me. Her behavior was strange, but I plunged my sword through her spine and threw her down into the abyss. I went back over to the bounty and collected what I needed. I opened the gates and ran back to the entryway. This was not a normal contract, but I had fulfilled my obligation. I returned to the city of Markoth. I needed to find Muri. I had a ton of questions. I found her walking around in the market. I waited for her to be alone. I approached her. I let her know that I had fulfilled her contract. I asked her why there were so many guards there and how a bounty hunter knew to come for me. She had no answers. I could see by the look of her face she was afraid. I pushed her along. I had questions for the Dark Brotherhood.